Welcome to season 2 of the Jeremy Mullins podcast. We take a deep dive into different educational topics to help you optimize your life. I am Jeremy, your host. Today's episode is brought to you by Mickey's Pet Supplies, and they will be sponsoring all of our future podcasts with Mr. Brian from Dogs for Our Heroes. Did I say that right? I butchered it, didn't I?
Dogs for Brave.
Dogs for the Brave. They are heroes, though. It is good to have you back on here. I actually got a lot of feedback that people enjoyed our not only our topic but our conversation with each other. So I thought that was good.
That is good to hear. I found
And
it
just so everybody,
fairly entertaining.
yeah. Well, and I think it hit it off. I laughed. I think it was your wife that sent it over. I was like, yeah. I was like, I think he set the tone when he just looked and said, yeah. Well, I'm glad we established that I'm not a doctor and you're not a priest. We can now move forward.
We can move forward now. Yes,
So
and I'm happy to. This time I'm not. Our last discussion, I was battling a lovely head cold that only got worse
yeah.
that night after we. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having a much more clear-headed conversation today.
Well, yeah, and that was before Christmas. I think the Rhino virus ran through our home over
Oh
Christmas.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think you and I both got a little bit rough after that.
yeah.
But today we're going to talk about bell bottoms.
Why wouldn't we?
Yeah,
Why
right.
wouldn't we?
I mean, we're just going to establish that you and I are not into fashion either. But
I mean, Ralph Lauren, Versace sitting over here. We're just having some conversations. It's what we do.
yeah, 100%. We're going to talk about things that maybe come back in style, right? That are maybe hot topics, and then they kind of get lost, maybe. Especially, I would argue, um, in our second half of life, we're seeing this things become really hot topics in social media, and then they kind of burn out, right? Things come and they go. That was the bell bottom analogy. But we're going to be talking about supplements in general and 3 specific supplements that I put on my story a couple of weeks ago. And you and I were having a conversation about, yeah, Jeremy, I take those. And then kind of off the cuff, you gave me a few reasons. And I'm like, that's interesting because that was just some stuff at a conference I went to that they were hitting on and talking about. And that's not why I want people to take it. So we're going to hit on 3 supplements today, talk about the benefits that they have, not only for optimal health, dropping body fat, performance, some of the things that we hear from them, but also in this whole host that you and I are kind of, in this other world of, concussions, TBIs. Yes. How are we dealing with stress, from certain issues throughout our life, where that's the kind of cool and sexy research coming out now.
Depression, anxiety, it's all lumped in together, right? And that's I found it very intriguing when that's why I commented on it, with that post. I felt really good about myself because I made some decisions. But again, I was looking at it from, I've started adding a lot of supplements into my diet over the last several months. I've been very good about taking care of my body because I recognize that the body fuels my mind and really helps um, keep a lot of my anxiety and the depression and those things that I've struggled with, especially after service, keep them at bay, right? And the more I invested in myself from a physical aspect, I recognized that I had a much better opportunity to keep my mental and emotional self in check. Um, so looking into these supplements and starting to understand that, the magnesium with the sleep and helping with the mental, um, how do they, just finding that balance, right? That mental balance. Same thing with omega 3s with helping with depression, anxiety, and, obviously there's so many other benefits that go along with this, and the creatine with, the brain functionality and help potentially repairing whatnot. So that neuroplasticity, um, it just makes sense, right? It's like, well, why wouldn't we want to invest in these things? Why wouldn't we want to take the opportunity to try and utilize these things to ensure that we are taking every advantage we can to, you know, make the best version of ourselves again?
Yeah, and I think, speaking of military, the bottom line up front, the bluff, this is like, hey, omega 3 fatty acids, magnesium, and creatine should be 3 supplements that everyone is taking. and we're going to touch on it more for kind of the mental side of it today, because that's where we're talking about, like, it's coming out with all the sexy research and all the hot topics. And, I'm kind of like, we should be taking these anyway, just for optimal health and, for feeling good and performance standpoint. And, I think that's the cool thing about, like, seeing the needs in some of these. And it's hard. I'll start out and say that, like, the post I did was like, okay, what 3 supplements would Jeremy recommend? And that's tough, right? Like, listen, I work for a supplement company. I get it. Like, to come up with just 3 supplements, it's very hard to do, because you can argue that a lot of supplements can be beneficial for certain people, but that's where I get into, we have to really look at the individual need.
Right.
So when I broke it down to, like, hey, I feel like these 3 everyone should be on, it's because of the whole host of benefits that come along with them, right? And I'm not even touched on the neurological side. So that's going to be cool to kind of, dive down that rabbit hole. So, first and foremost there, it is going to be creatine monohydrate, magnesium, and omega-3 fatty acids. Those are 3 supplements that I feel comfortable, ethical saying that, hey, most people need to be on these, right? And then kind of sliding over to, the side of it, if you've had, a TBI in service, or, a car accident, or even just concussions. Like, I know a lot of gentlemen our age, I'm going with gentlemen on this, not necessarily ladies yet, but gentlemen our age that played sports in high school, specifically football.
Absolutely.
How many times did you have a head hit that maybe wasn't diagnosed as a concussion, right? Or for your ladies on the flip side, for your softball, for even, I'm sure you see it in volleyball, right?
Absolutely.
Like, how many headshots, went on that we didn't even think about. So these 3 supplements can play a big role in that side of things, but also just in general wellness, right? And I'll say this: remember, supplements are there to supplement the diet. They're not a quick fix. And we'll get to this, right? Just because you start doing these, you might not see your symptoms disappear like right away. It has to be a continuous, effect over time.
Right. And that's, I'm finding that out myself on my own journey, right? Like, I had some really good conversations with some good friends that, are very knowledgeable, and, also affiliated with, Dogs for Our Brave. And, magnesium was the one that she threw out. She's like, is a game changer for us. Right. So I've been on this regimen for going about 2 months now, and I can honestly say I feel a difference. Um, again, because I'm not necessarily, I care, the physical aspect and the performance aspect is important to me, but it's really helping cleanse my body so that I feel mentally and emotionally stronger and more equipped to handle life. Um, and I find myself legitimately feeling more balance in some very stressful situations and just feeling more capable, right? And I don't believe that it's that placebo effect. I can feel the change, that I have that mental clarity and acuity to recognize, like, hey, I'm getting ready to get into something pretty deep here, and I know I'm gonna, I have to manage some emotions, and I'm able to manage them and keep them in check at a much higher level than I was, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So I am absolutely feeling the effects.
Well, let's pull a couple things out of that with magnesium. Okay, one, you were 100% spot on, right? You guys remember this? The doctor in him. It is very good at cleansing the body if you use magnesium citrate,
Yep.
but we don't want you using magnesium citrate alone. Okay, so remember, there are different forms of magnesium, and what I have found best is a mixture, right? Because it's kind of like, lay out almonds, walnuts, you know, macadamia nuts, and you can set and say, well, this one's the best nut because it's higher in these vitamins and minerals. This one's better because it's higher in these. Okay, they all have benefits. So getting a mixture of magnesium is where I
And
would,
that's what I use.
yeah, and that's where it's going to be. That's what First Form, we make a mixture of it, but there's plenty of good ones, out
Yep.
there. When we're looking at finding that option for magnesium. Okay, I traditionally have always recommended magnesium for sleep, right? Because I
Yes.
looked at it, once again with my mainly my clientele, and for the listeners, right, that know this, like, I've worked with the tip of the spear individuals for like 5% of my quote unquote people I've worked with, right? So, a handful of professional athletes in different sports along the way, some of the special forces guys and gals. Yes, there's some tip of the spear there, but for most of us, it's your everyday people. And magnesium, I always looked at it for recovering from our workouts and get better sleep. That was the big reason I started recommending magnesium. Okay. But we have to look at what you were talking about. Magnesium's been shown inside of, for when we're talking about brain health, to help protect the brain and protect the neurons specifically by reducing the risk of cell death. And that's the biggest thing we're looking at magnesium when it comes to the brain. There was a couple studies that showed that when there is a concussion or brain injury, that there's a depletion of magnesium levels inside the brain. And Brian, I would argue, and this is just me speaking, because we see that it could be up to 60% of Americans are low in magnesium in general. So I'm just wondering if we did like a test of magnesium levels in Americans' brains, like would we be low? Would it be low in 60% like it is in the body in general? Because I doubt if that's been looked at specifically.
Right. And that's, when is the most optimal time that our body recovers? Our body, our brain, whatnot recovers. It's during sleep, and we need optimal sleep, right? So if magnesium is helping put us in that state of optimal recovery as we're resting, as we're sleeping, I mean, all of the benefits that we're feeling, the physical, the psychological, the emotional, right? Like you could weigh them all together because we're now finding we're finding, and that was another huge reason why I wanted to utilize the magnesium, right? Again, that compound form of magnesium, I recognized that my sleep was going to improve, right? Like it doesn't necessarily, I I try to get to bed early and I'm, 9 p.m. because I'm usually up at 4 to 4:30 to get up and get to the gym. Um, Sometimes I don't get that full 7 to 8 hours, but I work really hard to do that consistently. Um, but even when I don't, if I get 6 to 7, I find myself getting that deep sleep, so I have that recovery aspect, and that's it's a huge part of that next day. It's like if we want to be productive the following day, like we crushed it today, but if we want that long term effect, we have to be getting that quality sleep. And and we can go on and on about the benefits, right? The links to, lack of sleep and performance in so many areas, the lack of sleep and cellular damage and, cancer links. I mean, it is,
You,
I mean,
want
you
to
really can't, I mean, I don't think people really understand changing the narrative, right? Because there's a lot, it's go, go, go. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Blah. Okay, well,
you want
you're
to
going to get there way faster if you continue on this trek.
you want to age faster, develop disease, don't sleep.
Yeah.
It'd be a great way to say it.
I
Okay.
mean, there are those few, can't, but for lack of a better phrase, freaks out there that can just operate, you know, but they are so few and far between.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
it is the tiniest of
yeah,
percentages.
because it's like I forget what the percentage is, but it's less than 5%
Yes.
of the world that has that gene
Yeah.
that allows someone to get more cycles of sleep in a less period of time,
Right.
right? Yes, that exists. But for most of us, you want to age faster and you want to develop disease, don't sleep.
Yep.
And that's the reason why I was so big on magnesium inside of my individual's plans because of the benefits of sleep, right? And that's where I would like was just focused on. I really didn't look at the benefits for the brain, which we're going to touch on, or the heart, right? Or even here recently, like how much of our cramping in sport is magnesium,
Right.
because cramping, magnesium does the opposite. It allows things to relax. So I think a lot of the cramps that we see is not necessarily a potassium, issue, right? Or dehydration issue in sport as much as the magnesium.
Magnesium based. Well, and that, the other side of this, Jeremy, I think it's really important, if people are struggling with sleep, what do they normally do? They Tylenol PM or, some of those types, which is like, that's terrible. Like, we don't want to be putting that stuff in our body. Like, it doesn't, there's no long-term benefits there. Right. So, but again, it goes back to that. A lot of people are just preconditioned. It's like, oh, it's that quick fix. Like, that'll take care of it immediately. It's like, well, yeah, but what happens the next morning when you wake up? You're just like, I'm groggy. I'm all, everything's foggy. It takes me a while to clear it all off. It's like, well, yeah, you basically just comatose yourself to get some sleep. Um, and that quality of sleep just isn't there either. I mean, you're essentially just knocking yourself out. So,
Have a
um,
to track your sleep. For the listeners, if you got a way to track your sleep, I highly recommend. Like if you've never taken magnesium before, you start taking it. Track it. Look at your sleep based on the whatever wearable you've got. So it'll be surprised at like how much difference and improvement it'll be.
well, your sleep improves, and then all of a sudden, if you're utilizing these supplements and they're putting you in a better place, from a sleep point of view, some of those excuses of I'm too tired to go to the gym, I'm too tired to get up and move, right? They start to
Oh,
disappear,
yes.
right? They
Easy. Right.
start to disappear. And then it's like I feel really good. I think I'm going to start working out. So these, even if you're not an individual, right? And there's so many out there that aren't doing what they should be doing physically yet, right? First step could be starting get yourself on these three basic supplements and start putting good things in your body, right? And start changing, your internal processing, right? Start changing that recovery, start changing those sleep habits, right? And then all of a sudden you're going to start feeling that energy, right? And the excuses become less and less. Um, I think that's such a, a lot of people are, I would assume that people that aren't doing a great job of being physical and doing those types of things assume that well, I don't need to start supplements until I really start working out. It's like, no, we should be taking these all the time.
No, because like I said, as we list through here, like talked about heart health, talked about, brain health, magnesium can benefit every single person, whether you're working out or not. And these are my notes I'm going to read, that I took for, the TBI/concussion with this. But it protects the neurons. So magnesium can help prevent neurons from being damaged, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Regulates calcium. So magnesium levels decrease after a TBI or concussion, which can lead to an influx of calcium glutamate into the neurons. So that can aid to that death of the cell, which magnesium is going to help with. And then here's the big one: improves blood flow. Right. So magnesium can relax, which is its main goal in the body. We talked about that with cramping earlier. Relax the vascular smooth muscle, which may increase cerebral blood flow, getting more oxygen to the brain. Right. And any injury, whether it's concussion, TBI, it's that lack of oxygen
Right.
that goes, right. And I think this is a good segue to omega 3s, but that lack of oxygen is going to increase inflammation. And you look back to the Sago mining accident in West Virginia, and this goes back a few years. I was still in West Virginia at the time. There was one survivor, and so much carbon monoxide to the brain, they ran very high dose omega 3s in the hospital to help decrease inflammation.
Inflammation.
Not medicine. Now, there might be other medicines I don't like, but high dose omega 3s. And before we translate, just so I don't forget, hey, 400, what is base recommendation for magnesium? 400 milligrams total, give or take. It's going to be different with every individual person. I would take 35, 45 minutes before bed. Maybe a little bit earlier if you're a wired individual. So you want to kind of turn that mind off. You might want to take it a little bit, not
I
looking
try.
at, not looking at anybody. take it take it a little bit earlier, than 30, 45 minutes. For me, it's just part of my nighttime routine. I actually mix two of these supplements that we're talking about together. I mix creatine and magnesium together because it's easier for me to remember to take my creatine with my magnesium than it is post-workout. So that's kind of my routine, and that starts my nightly routine. That's when I check the doors, make sure everyone's, quote, safe, for the night. So that's how I do the magnesium. So I want to get the amount out there before I forgot about it. Translation to omega-3 fatty acids. Once again, highlighting that Sago mining accident, but also just like omega-3s will be written as a prescription if you have high triglycerides. So
That
another
says a lot.
yeah.
That says a lot, right? That's come on. If they're loading you up with that stuff, in hospitals, how are we not utilizing this, in our daily lives? It makes sense, right? I mean, what's one of the most beneficial, protein omega-3 food sources there is? Luckily, it's one of my favorites, and it's salmon, right? I mean, I absolutely I had salmon this weekend, and we try to eat it, as often as we can. But again, that so yeah.
And that brings up a good point I want to make. Like, I still unless you're eating it almost every single day because you live in an area that fish isn't abundant, I would still probably recommend supplement with omega-3. And this is something
Absolutely.
that changed a little bit over my career. In the beginning, I would say, well, if we're eating fish, multiple times a week, you probably don't need to take any omega-3s. But once again, just looking at the benefits, to long-term health, brain health, omega-3s is just gonna be one of those that is in there, right? And generally recommendation here is 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams of omega-3s per day. And this is very important for someone who's new on this journey. You don't want to just pick up a bottle of fish oil
Right.
and think just because it says 1 gram on the front that there's a gram of omega-3s in there, because that's where the quality is going to come into play here. Because sometimes you flip it over, there's only going to be 200 milligrams of omega-3s in 1,000 milligrams or a gram of fish oil. So my question there is, okay, what's the other 800? So it's a very important thing to look at when it comes to the omega-3 fatty acids. But yeah, traditionally,
Knowing what you're putting in some time in, and to really understand what you're putting in your body, right? And but going back to the aspect of, we want to eat as clean and as healthy as we possibly can all the time. Even when you're doing that, it is unfortunately very obvious that it's very hard to find that super nutrient dense food on a consistent basis. I mean, that's just where our market is today, right? So the majority of the food we eat, even those of us that are trying to eat clean and put the best things in our body, they're it's not what it was 150 years ago, whatever, for a lot of different reasons, right? And that's a whole nother conversation. But all the more reason why we need to be adding these supplements on the daily basis, regardless of if you could have the cleanest diet ever, these supplements are still going to be massively beneficial.
because the benefits outweigh the and I think I did the math at one time. It's like $1 a day, $30 a month, and that's if someone's buying First Form brand, right? Of course, like remember I work for First Form. I'm always going to teach on the podcast the importance of the supplementation and not teach the product name. So, for example, we're teaching omega-3s right now. I'm not teaching full mega, which is the name of our product, right? Because I want people to, no matter what they're purchasing, to be able to get a quality brand. But like it's $1 a day, for creatine, for magnesium, and for omega-3s from First Form. It comes down to $1 a day to
Such a
supplement.
great point, because I guarantee there's people out there that aren't on this journey yet or thought about this journey, and they're like, oh, these supplements, they see the price and they're like, oh, it's so expensive. But well, when you break it down, right? Like, first and foremost, let's just understand, are you willing to invest in yourself or not?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what things do you need? Are you willing to sacrifice to that you just, whatever you're purchasing and your budget is? And, a lot of people out there, they're living on a budget and they've got to stay within those parameters. But what on your budget is either keeping your needle neutral or actually negative, right? What is, what things are you putting in your body or you're purchasing, right, on a consistent basis that you can just simply get rid of, right? In order to invest in yourself, right? And invest in your own health for the longevity of who you want to become. We got to be willing to sacrifice there. And when you really weigh it all out, it shouldn't feel like a sacrifice at all. It should feel motivating to invest in yourself and your own health.
And that is one of the factors in why I chose those three as like my top three, because I took budget into consideration. Like I took budget into consideration. And going back to what you just said, and I'm just going to piggyback on your soapbox, $30. Like you have to be able to invest that. You can find that somewhere in the budget that you're spending on
I
coffee,
mean,
energy drinks.
alcohol. I mean, let's just talk about the big ones, right? Let's just be very, very honest. Um, those of you that are, you're diving into the alcohol, you're diving in, if you're still using nicotine, whatnot, like let's just be honest with ourselves. If you're going to invest in these supplements, doesn't it just make sense to automatically get rid of those negatives, right? Or at least significantly cut back and move yourself to a place of not putting those in your body anymore or severely limiting them, right? The nicotine, if you're smoking, whatnot, get rid of it, right? You got to stop. You got to get it. It's, you're killing yourself. It's poison, right? So, how many of these things that we can sacrifice are straight poison anyways. And that could be either what we're actually ingesting in our body or what we're ingesting in our mind, right? How much do we spend on Netflix or YouTube TV or whatnot that it's like, oh, well, what am I going to do if I don't have my shows? Well, you're going to read more. You're going to exercise, right? You're going to have conversations, right?
Go to
There's
bed
so
early. Get good sleep.
you could get good sleep. Like you, instead of staying up and binge watching whatever until 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Like, so, it really comes down to having a hard conversation with yourself. What am I willing to do and invest in
Love it.
to push myself forward?
History of omega-3s for me was, once again, performance, decreasing inflammation, right? And decreasing inflammation can aid in fat loss because a lot of our diseases are driven by inflammation. So for fat loss and for recovery of workouts, that was my initial why I liked omega-3 in my clients. Then, as we transition and really looking at, kind of the twofold. Once again, I always say we're brought together for multiple different reasons, like at periods of our life, right? So working with a little bit more college athletes, of course, with Katie, my wife, teaching softball. 3 of the girls had concussions this year, right? Getting to know you, having conversations of what you've dealt with, right? What are the people, the veterans you're working with? What do they experience, right? It's like this whole concussion for me and TBI the last 3 or 4 months has just been like, boom, right in the forefront, right? So then we look at the omega-3s and we start diving into, okay, what are the benefits for mental health, right? So we look at omega-3s, it can reduce the oxidative stress of the brain, caused by a concussion or TBI. It can improve the neurons, right? And helping to, establish normal brain derived neurological factor, BDNF. Okay. So once again, I'm reading notes here. I'm definitely not this smart. Um, and then protect the blood brain barrier. So omega-3s can be maintain the integrity of the blood brain barrier. So those are some benefits that we're starting to look at. And the last one here, and I think this is the relationship going back to the Sago mining accident. Omega-3s can maintain waste clearance and substance exchange in and out of the brain. So really helping to decrease, those quote damage that could be done, inside of that. 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams, generally my recommendation just in general, but I'm okay if people increase it. And I've increased it close to 10 grams before per day in my past. And that was for both my surgeries. So looking, post-surgery, how
Right.
to decrease inflammation caused by surgery, right?
Prep your body before.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
before, right? Yeah.
Or sorry. Yeah.
Study of one, right? I can't, sit and say that this was, that it's going to work for everybody, but both of my surgeries I recovered faster from than the average person. Outcomes were good, whether you're looking at strength, performance, all that stuff. So a higher dose of omega-3s I ran with both surgeries. And then I'll run it in high volume training too. So if I'm having the opportunity to train, heavy volume, heavy weights, or a lot of miles, whatever the case may be, then I'll run a little bit more additional omega-3s, but 2,000
Help with that inflammation.
that standpoint or the recommendation. So how much you taking today?
Somewhere around it's 25, I think.
500. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in between 2 to 4 is awesome. I don't have a standpoint, I'd probably run a little bit higher, short term. So, this is something I'm working on right now for the college, like a little protocol that goes with, how much omega-3s, how much, creatine, like if a student athlete has a concussion and they're not taking the supplements, right? So they're not already on them. They're not already doing a dose. What is the protocol? Right. And I would probably run a little bit higher doses. So I'd probably go more on that higher end, 4,000, 6,000 milligrams a day for that first week or so.
Right.
That inflammation, that damage has just occurred, then go more to the 2,000 as a standard dosage.
Yeah. And sounds like I based on this conversation and, this listening to your previous podcast, talks about this, but I probably need to up my magnesium a little bit. Probably by about 100 milligrams. But the creatine, I know we're going to probably transition to that next, but, I'm anywhere from 5 to 7.5, per day. So I know you can go up, you talk about 10, I believe.
Yeah, 5 to 10's always been just a standard recommendation for creatine.
Yeah.
And more on body size than anything else, right? Just thinking like, hey, smaller athletes, 5 grams a day, bigger athletes, 10 grams a day. I'm playing with 10 right now. I'd always been 5. And I'll be the first one to say, like, I've just probably the last 6 to 8 months been consistent with creatine because, life just got busy and I didn't look at myself necessarily as an athlete or trying to perform well for a while, if that makes sense.
Same. Nope.
Right. So,
Same.
like,
Same.
yeah. So creatine for me was always recommended more for that tip of the spear and performance.
Yep.
And then here recently over the last, 8 months for even myself and like the new data, as we talked about, like the bell bottoms are back in style, right? All this new data coming out about creatine, like, for brain health, it's just like, man, have we been missing the boat on this?
Yes, and that's that's what kind of flipped my mindset as well. Because back in my athlete days, it's like absolutely creatine was part of it was 100% part of my routine. Um, but after that, it's like, well, why would I take it? I
Why
don't,
would I think it?
I
That's
don't like. I'm not some high performing athlete, right? I like to work out. I like to take care of myself. That's good enough, right? I'm in the gym. Um, so the brain health was, yeah,
And
it's
even from a client standpoint, like, building muscle tissue, like understanding like, hey, ladies, you're going through menopause, you should be on creatine. Post build, it's been shown to help build muscle tissue,
yep.
especially going through menopause or postmenopause. So I look at this as like, man, you missed the mark on this one, Jeremy. I'm not recommending this supplement more, throughout your coaching career. But it's reason is once again the top 3 that I would now would put in there. And then as we start, going again to this, like, and this is where like some promising research, is coming out. So once again, just reading off my notes I took for this, creatine supplementation may help with TBIs to improve brain function and reduce symptoms. There was a study come out of South Carolina, I think University of South Carolina, it talked about decreasing symptoms, up to like 50% of the time. So that headache, that dizziness, the fatigue that comes out of a concussion, or TBI, like those are the symptoms. 50% faster recovery time. So if we're looking at that in the sense of like active military or active sports, getting you back on the ball field, right? Or
Yeah.
in, in the unit in action faster, right?
Which, yeah, I mean, unit readiness, right? Competency, having the ability to get, if I would have been able to, if something that, we would have been able to utilize when I was downrange, and maybe I'm only out for a week, instead of, the 2.5 weeks that they had to hold me out after my concussion. Um,
Or
so
I, not saying this happened to you, or not saying it happened, but I'm sure it happened somewhere along the way, or not holding you out for 2 or 3 weeks, get you back in action when then
yeah,
you're putting yourself at risk and others at risk, right?
yeah,
So that's where like my mind goes to in the thought process of what's coming along with this. So once again, reading from my notes because I'm like, man, Jeremy sounds smart half the time, and then other times it's just he's Appalachia. I'm reading. Maybe we need to put what's it called? The caption.
subtitles.
Yeah, captions on here. So creatine may protect brain cells from oxidative stress damage. So once again, kind of a two, prong attack at it. Yes, with omega-3s and the creatine for that oxidative stress. It's also helps recover faster. So it's been shown that improves recovery. And also in this, it noted in concussions in children. I'm like, so we only looked at the concussions in children, but that might be only studies that were out there at the time, that was looking at this information. Reduces the risk of the symptoms that we touched on, the headaches, the dizziness, fatigue, and improves cognitive function, memory, and communication skills. Brian, I think you touched on that earlier, just in sense like some things that you're feeling with everything, right? You get a good night's rest, you can just feel it from a mental aspect the next day. And the last thing, reduce the risk of seizures that could come post TBI or post headache. And it's like, man, and I get athletic performance, I get stronger, I recover faster, plus I'm gonna get these neurological benefits. Sign
Can
me up.
you go through um, all of the side effects, the negative side effects of everything we just talked about?
The negatives, like the headaches. All right, yes.
Where the yeah, like what are, like when you see all these commercials for, all these wonder drugs, and it's like you have all these side effects, right? Like, but you could experience all these. Well, Hi. Oh, I'm getting attacked by Bravo, one of our dogs who's getting ready to go get placed. Just
Uh,
came in to say hi. Um, no, a little bit of sarcasm. Um, you know, where, what are we missing on here, right? There, if you're staying within, the parameters and you're doing your homework and you understand what you're putting in your body, what are you waiting for? I
and
mean,
and
what are we waiting for?
and these three,
These
guys
are
and gals,
game changers for ourselves. Everybody.
and it is why, and it's just like I said. What was funny is like we didn't have this conversation about this when I put it out, for the three that I would recommend, right? And there were some good, there were some trainers I respect, message over and like, well, what about a multivitamin? What about this? What about that? And 100%, like I would not be against a multivitamin when I start a journey with someone, but my role as a coach, specifically as nutrition coach, is to get them where, okay, well, maybe the diet is good enough where we don't necessarily need a multivitamin, right? Like inside the plant,
Right.
100%. But then there's also like the consideration like CoQ10, love it for older clientele. But my 20-year-old doesn't need CoQ10. So what I narrowed these three down was like, okay, these would benefit everybody. And then you and I just, once again coming up with a conversation of like the post TBI and concussions. It was like, oh yeah, have you seen this? Have you seen that? And that's why we wanted to talk about it today because if you've experienced, listen, you should be on them anyway. Let me just press it with that, right? So
Yeah.
get on the soapbox. Like anyone listening to this, anyone you share this with, that's my opinion. We should be on these three supplements for overall health and wellness. But if there's been any experience of a TBI, any experience of one concussion diagnosed, or one hard hit, of the head in any sport or any car accident, etc., why not? The benefits are just too great to pass on.
It just makes sense, right? It's common sense. It really is. In my opinion, why would we not, you know, just even if you haven't experienced those things, the mental clarity because of the fact that you're provided better rest for your body, you're providing, which ultimately leads to better recovery, right? Throughout your body, but especially the mental aspect of things. And because of the world that we live in and the society we live in, and everything is so fast and constantly moving, right? And we find ourselves so easily overwhelmed. If we're putting things in our body that potentially allow us the ability to possess greater clarity in our thoughts on a daily basis, ultimately can impact our decision making, right? Um, it impacts our emotional stability, and if we start to recognize and we're more aware of our emotional ability, our emotional, if we get out of whack or whatnot, we're starting to track on that, and we can rationally start to think through these situations and start making better decisions, in our daily life, and that can be the smallest to the biggest aspects of our life.
100%.
How are we not have like why is we yes, I mean, as a society, where do we get to if we have more individuals that are investing in themselves in these types of supplements, right? I read it's similar to, I read a study the other day, or a note the other day, that said something like 4% of Americans lift weights on a consistent basis. I mean, it's like, if we up that number to 10%, that would, you get these individuals that they start feeling the benefits of that weightlifting and that exercise, right? And if that 10%, right, is starting to show that incredible change in every aspect of their life because they're investing in themselves, right? That becomes contagious. They're going to
And I,
start in the best way, they're going to start infecting everyone around them, right? Same thing with these supplements. The more individuals we have that are willing to invest in themselves and these types of supplements, right? They're doing their homework and they're putting the right, these core three, if you want to call them that, right? Couldn't we move mountains within society if everybody started getting better rest, better mental clarity, right? The list goes on and on and on.
you see it. And I
Yeah,
would argue this.
absolutely.
Let's start now. Okay. So
Yeah.
here's some things I'm going to ask. Here are three things for the listeners. One, if you're not taking these three supplements, take these three supplements, $1 a day. It's what the investment is. Basically, roughly $1 a day, $30 a month. That is your investment. 2, go out and share this podcast with someone else, right? Because if we can, once again, if the percentage of people who are lifting weights is 4%, right? All right. Well, what's the percentage of people taking these 3 supplements? Probably less than that. So
Probably.
let's get more people taking supplements. These 3, let's get more people lifting weights. We're doing good. Okay. The other thing I would ask guys, and you might not have pets, you might not. Cool, got it. Go and check out, Mickey's Pet Supply. Give them a like on their social media, because once again, it's a free thing that you can do to help out small businesses, along with Going Dogs for Our Brave, which is your guys' Instagram. Giving them a like, there, just so you can watch and what's going on. And what was the little guy's name? Is getting ready to go be placed?
That's Bravo.
Bravo. That's one you posted the other day, right? Is that Bravo? Is that Bravo?
That's Hager.
Oh, that's Hager. Okay.
We're still looking for a home for him.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if there's any veterans out there looking for an in-home working dog,
awesome.
Reach out to me, Brian at tfob.org, because
that will be our last ask. If you know of any veteran looking for an in-home dog or if you're a veteran yourself, reach out. So that could be our final ask of the day. Hey man, I enjoy having you on here. It brings a different little aspect to life. And I think, we got 2 or 3 that we've talked about having, some episodes on there. If you guys can think of anything that you'd like to hear Brian's opinion on, coming from, his position at Dogs for Your Brave, or his experience inside of, collegiate volleyball coaching, to, being an Army medic, let us know. So we're going to have plenty of other conversations in the future as we develop our relationship and do some things for our veterans out there. Hope everyone has a great day. And once again, brother, appreciate you for your time.
Thanks for having me on. It's always it's just enjoyable, really enjoyable.
See you soon, literally in a week or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, man. Thanks.